The leader of the Brexit movement, Nigel Farage, has said that the globalist green ideology surrounding the commitment to net zero has replaced Christianity as the driving force within the governing Conservative Party. Following the publication of the independent review of net zero by Conservative MP Chris Skidmore last week, which called for the government to double down on wind and solar power, as well as banning new gas boilers within a decade, Nigel Farage surmised that in light of the economic crisis befalling the nation, the green agenda stands as the issue in which the Tories are most out of touch with their voters. So unwavering is the belief among most politicians these days that Britain can have a direct influence on future global temperatures. It is as though climate change has replaced Christianity in the Palace of Westminster, Mr. Farage wrote in London's Daily Telegraph. The Brexit champion said that there is an urgent need for honest debate to be had around the green agenda so that the Westminster class and their media friends can actually hear some common sense. He noted that the so-called revolution in onshore wind and solar projects called for by Skidmore will see the British countryside littered with ugly bird-chomping monsters and a large segment of productive agricultural land commandeered for overwhelmingly Chinese-made solar panels. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak used one of his first acts in power to reverse the short-lived lifting of the prohibition on fracking, meaning that the bountiful and reliable domestic resource of shale natural gas will remain underground. We are repeatedly told that a clean, green revolution will provide cheap and reliable power. Yet when comparing prices, I can see that British consumers are paying 50% or more for their electricity than people in France and Germany. We pay twice as much for electricity as those who live in Australia. And we pay more than those living in the United States of America, Mr. Farage wrote. The arch-Brexiter noted that the green agenda has already wreaked havoc on the British industrial economy, pointing to the fact that much of the country's chemical production has been offshored and the UK's 2 aluminium smelters have been shuttered. Indeed, just last week, Liberty Steel announced that it would be laying off over 400 workers due to the high cost of energy and the impacts of green agenda regulations. Mr. Farage said that he might be able to stomach the negative impacts of the green agenda to the British economy and ultimately the people, if the government could demonstrate that it would actually have an impact on the world at large, noting that the UK emits a minuscule percentage of global CO2. Meanwhile, the world saw a record 8 billion tons of coal burned last year, largely driven by plants in China, as well as Germany being forced to ramp up production after its green policies failed to protect it from decline in gas imports due to the conflict with Russia. To put it into context, researchers at the University of Oxford found in November that communist China has emitted more carbon dioxide in the past 8 years, 80 billion tons, than the United Kingdom had between 1750 and 2020, 78 billion tons. The researchers went on to find that since 1990, the UK has reduced its emissions by more than any other industrialist nation, falling by 54.8%. During the same time period, China's CO2 emissions jumped by 329%. I hate to break it to Mr. Skidmore and his friends, but China intends to build 80 new coal-fired power stations annually long into the future to produce the energy required to meet the needs of its 1.4 billion people, Mr. Farage wrote. Bearing all of this in mind, I think that, having produced his report, Chris Skidmore has a duty to organize a debate about his green agenda. He needs to explain why he is happy to make poor Britons even poorer, and very often colder, in his quest to hit net zero by 2050.